Hey, hey. I am happy to be here. This is day 7 of going live and focusing on some of the key considerations in equitable grading in STEM. This 30 day. Mally, are you using the microwave? Oh, okay. We're back. Yeah, sorry about that. As I was saying, we are in day 7 of the Equitable Grading in STEM Planner, 30-day transformational planner. This is to support making some key changes to your grading practices. And it's like a journal. It's a reflection journal. It's also a space for you to think about some of the actions that are in here, to do some of the early planning to make changes to ensure that all students are able to exist in your classroom with you engaging in equitable practices for them to ensure that all students can learn. This is based off of, as I've said before, if you're just joining me today, this is based off of my book, Equity Builds Expertise, 9 Strategies for STEM Teachers to Reach All Students. And what I did here with the planners, I've taken chapter 8, which focuses on equitable grading, but is actually part of the section of the book that focuses on the actions that you can take. And this chapter, Real Numbers for Real Knowledge, is strategy 8 in the 9 strategies when it comes to building student expertise and to ensuring that all students are actually learning. And so today on day 7, I get to have us focus in on assessment design. Now, assessment design is challenging in that I know many of us are using assessments that are pre-designed sometimes, are purchased, or provided to us rather than by us. And I think as long as it's a great assessment, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And there's still ways that we can ensure that we are including equitable practices in how we design even some of our smaller assessments. Because as you know, when we talk about assessment design, we're not only talking about large either state assessments or national assessments or interim assessments. We can also be using equitable grading practices in our daily assessment of student learning. So, one of the things I always like to do is start off the session with a quote that is related. And so, the quote for today says, "Knowledge builds confidence, and confidence builds success." This pairs nicely with my framework, actually, the Equity Builds Expertise framework, because in this last component around action, we talk a lot about building student self-efficacy in our classes, right? Students need to believe that they are capable of being successful in our classes. And that comes from them seeing their growth celebrated, them seeing their success in understanding, and their ability to demonstrate knowledge. So that brings us back to our assessments, right? How are we assessing our students? So, one of the things I would love for you to consider as a reflection today and a reflection prompt is, do your assessments focus on understanding and skills over memorization? Do they measure understanding? Or are they just or are they just measuring a student's ability to memorize content? Because if you are someone who can memorize easily, it does not translate into true understanding. And this is where we need to take a look at taxonomy, Bloom's taxonomy, as we're looking at the levels of understanding and then how that translates into behavior or demonstration of knowledge is something that we should consider, right? Do assessments focus on skills over rote knowledge? Let's think about it. For example, in science, lab projects can assess, if designed well, the application of concepts rather than just simply recalling formula, right? Or um, we can think about ways that we might want to redesign our assessments to ensure that they are including more questions that are going to enable students to show whether they have a deeper understanding, right? Um, I was thinking about how some of my assessments would simply be multiple choice. And I have seen some pretty decent multiple choice assessments and questions, I should say, thinking about some of the AP exams that are out there, like an AP Bio, some of the free response questions that also include some components that might be more multiple choice ish in design. I would say that there's room for the multiple choice questions to exist, right? If you're trying to just simply measure a student's ability to recall information. And I think there may be a need for that. So I'm not saying throw out those assessments. However, when it comes down to those standards, and we talked about this a few days ago, right? The standards that we truly care about, we want to make sure that students are able to demonstrate their knowledge their understanding and knowledge in a way that shows application, evaluation, creation, right? These are all higher on Bloom's taxonomy. And in order for them to do that, we need to infuse our assessments with some of those types of questions. Where do students get to show and have the ability to apply that knowledge? And maybe it's not going to be on an assessment that is a handwritten assessment. Maybe they actually do need to create something. Maybe they need to write and explain something. But it is critically important that we continue to evaluate what it is that our assessments are evaluating and whether students, and I'm going to add this piece too, whether students have had ample opportunities to practice those skills before the assessment. Because I've also seen where we will create the very best interim assessments, wonderful assessments that have questions that do push students thinking, but then that is the first time that they've experienced that because leading up to that, there isn't enough practice, or the weekly quizzes are more recall and never include practice thinking in that way. Homework assignments are again more recall or rote practice of a particular system or a way of solving, but then on the interim assessment or final assessment, now we're having them apply it to a new scenario and they've never done that before. So when we design our assessments, and there are several um, different people uh, authors who have books that really focus on assessments. And I will say Choosing to See by Dr. Pamela Seda, she does a wonderful job for math instruction where she focuses on how we can better assess students in a more equitable way. And I think it is definitely worth checking out. Um, I'm trying to see if I have her book. I literally just showed my twins a copy of her book. It's in the other room, but I've highlighted it before, and I can easily do another post highlighting that book. But also Building Thinking Classrooms by Peter Liljedahl is also another excellent text that discusses note taking, which I'm also passionate about, but then also assessments. This was a kind of a longer one. But as I said, I try to keep them between 10 and 15 minutes and no more than that. The bottom line here, though, is that assessments should reveal true understanding. And one of the reasons why is because we know that every grade tells a story. So we want to make sure it's one worth telling. All right, y'all. Have a great rest of your evening, a great end to your weekend, and I hope you start your week off great. Tomorrow begins our next day, and I will see you then.